A couple of years ago, I read a book entitled Eating Your Way Through the Gospels. This book was written by a priest called Robert Carris. I think he's a Franciscan. Eating Your Way Through the Gospels. And what he basically says is that as you read the Gospels, Jesus is either at a meal, coming from a meal, or going to a meal. Okay, so it's like the Gospels are full of times where Jesus is like, if you like, at a party. Right? He's either at a meal, going to a meal, or coming from a meal. It's very, very important. So Robert Carris, check that book out, Eating Your Way Through the Gospels. And so what happens then is that if you look at the ministry, right, Jesus's public ministry, one of the marks of this public ministry was what's being called table fellowship. Okay, table fellowship. So many things, go with Jesus's public ministry, his preaching, his teaching, his healing and exorcisms, okay, forgiveness of sins. But one mark is what we call fellowship. Very, very important. And what that simply means is that, Jesus broke bread. In fact, he was accused on a number of occasions, by the scribes and the Pharisees as someone who welcomed and ate with sinners and tax collectors. You find that scripture in Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through to 2. Very beautiful scripture. And what follows that is going to blow your mind. Okay? So it says, the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to listen to him. But the Pharisees and scribes began to complain, saying, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. Okay? This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. Now, following this, if you like, accusation, comes Jesus's telling of the three famous parables. You remember the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. Okay? So it's within this context that I kind of want to reflect with you on the idea of radical hospitality. Okay? So if you think of Jesus as someone who models for us radical hospitality, I think table fellowship is one of the important. And how does Jesus do that? Okay? I've mentioned again the idea there are best practices and there are bad practices. Now, I'm going to mention two things, and that comes right in that text. It says Jesus welcomes sinners. Okay? So welcoming sinners is a key aspect of this radical hospitality, if you like, of table fellowship. What does it simply mean to say he welcomed sinners? Okay? One of the things is he noticed them. Okay? He noticed them. He didn't ignore them. He recognized them. Okay? So if any of us wants to cultivate radical hospitality in terms of welcoming the stranger, just notice, recognize them. Okay? He does not despise them. Right? I think this was very clear in his ministry. And the Pharisees and the scribes noticed it. Okay? Because they despised the tax collectors and the sinners. Okay? He sees beyond the present circumstances. I think that's a strong aspect of what it means to welcome. Okay? Everybody saw them as tax collectors, as sinners. Okay? And Jesus saw beyond their present circumstances. Okay? In other words, what it means is that Jesus sees who we can become. All right? And that's one aspect of being able to welcome others. Okay? That you see who they can become. I think another aspect of what it means to welcome is also to listen. I think Jesus listened to them. Jesus was interested in their stories. All right? Whatever paths they had traveled on, whatever beaten them up, whatever had wounded them and all that, Jesus was attentive to that. He listened to them. Okay? So that's very, very important in terms of what? In terms of radical hospitality. Jesus welcomed sinners. That was his accusation. But he ate with them. He ate with sinners. And what does it mean now? In the what do you call the Near East cultures, or even in a lot of ancient cultures, okay, to sit at table with somebody and to break bread with a person meant so much. Okay, it meant that the person was not an enemy but a friend. Okay, person was not an enemy but a friend. Because you hear it again in the Gospels, Jesus reclined at table. You see, when you sit at table with others, right, nobody is above the other. It's like you all at eye level. You can, like I'm sitting here right now. This is Father's dining room, right? So if we all sit at this table, we can see each other eye to eye. That's so important. It's not like somebody is above and somebody is below, really? Okay. Now, you're friends, not enemies. That means you share from the same bowl. And many of the ancient cultures, like even for us in Africa, you ate from the same bowl, or you eat from the same bowl. I know in this day and age of COVID-19, I'm sure some of you are going, yuck, I might get infected. But, you share a meal, very important, okay? That means if God is our friend, that means God is an ally. See, because many of us, when we don't understand our relationship with God very well, we think God is a foe. God is not on our side. Okay? But with what Jesus demonstrated, it meant that God is not an enemy, but God is an ally. Okay? Now, in the scriptures, something is very, very important. You have to read through the scriptures to understand this. In the scriptures, there's always God and sinners. Okay? There's always what? God, who is the Holy One, the righteous one, and then there's sinners, your righteous ones. And that's you and I. Okay? Now, what ticked Jesus off a lot had something to do with, it upset those who call others sinners and think they are not sinners. I think that's what ticked Jesus off the most. So you had these Pharisees and scribes accusing Jesus that he welcomes and eats with sinners. Okay. That meant that they were not sinners. Okay. Now, in the scriptures, who is a sinner? A sinner is somebody who simply has missed the mark. Okay. The Greek word is hamartia, to miss the mark. So to sin is to miss the mark. It follows that sport of archery, right? So you have a target, you shoot the arrow, and if you miss your target, you've missed your mark. That's the idea of sin. And all of us, you and I, okay, we've all missed the mark. That's what Romans 3:23 tells us. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Okay? So if we want to be people who are radically hospitable, we want to follow after the example of Jesus, who welcomed and ate with sinners. And so the question is very simple. Okay? That's the question we want to reflect on. How far are you willing to go in welcoming and eating with other sinners? See, because you're a sinner, I'm a sinner. So how far are you willing to go in welcoming and eating with other sinners? God